KXVS, the voice of Stockton.
You know what I got? I got a picture of his face with the little pillow on, the sleep face, and we're in Chicago.
Are they already in Chicago?
The one and only Leo Biaz. Hey, Leo.
I'm excited to be back, my man. It was 9 days in Vegas. We got stuck in the desert, and we had a little hangover remix out there, man.
I wore a wig to school once, and they said no headgear was allowed.
How did
spider web
was it
tights.
obvious that it was a wig?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was having
a terrible
fun.
wig.
See, this is exactly why we have them on the show, and this is what makes them fun.
You're listening to KXVS, the voice of Stockton, 92.1 FM.
This is a production for the voice of San Joaquin. Porque nos vamos a enlazar con el mero, el gallo de Zacatecas.
That's right, homeboy.
El de Guayá. You got it, homeboy. Ahí les voy.
Dicen que soy poderoso. This is Darius Oliver, and you're listening to 92.1 KXVS, the voice of Stockton.
The views and opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of KXVS, the voice of Stockton, or its parents, affiliates, management, and staff.
The voice of San Joaquin presents the premiere episode of Live with Kimberly, with your host, Kimberly Warmsley.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? My name is Kimberly, and I am welcoming you to the Voice of San Joaquin. You're tuning into Live with Kimberly show. So this is a new platform. I'm very excited for this opportunity to share with the community my expertise as a licensed clinical social worker. It's going to be really, really real in this room. We are going to be talking about real issues, real obstacles, real life dilemmas, and I'm very excited for everybody to tune in. So sit back, relax, engage, and tune in. So let's get started. To my right of me, I'm pleased to present to the community someone who does not need an introduction.
Oh my God. I can't believe we started early this morning. My God. We started early this morning, huh? We're going to start this morning. Okay, that's how we're going to do it. Okay.
No introductions needed, everyone. This is Mr. Jerome Clay of Stockton, California. How are you, Mr. Clay?
Hey, you know what? I got to give the disclaimer. Look at these mugs that we have. We have her mugs. She put my, let me tell you, it's funny. I have my water in a water bottle, and she snatches my water bottle, opens it, and you got to have it in my cup, and throw it in a cup. So because I have to drink it out of her cup, I'm going to give the shout out to the Live with Kimberly cup, right? It's the cup?
It's a mug.
All right,
yes.
mug, huh? Yeah,
yes.
Good. Proud of you.
Listen. Hospitality, Jerome. Yeah. This is hospitality. I want to make sure that my guests are comfortable.
Okay.
You're feeling yourself. You're very hydrated. So
thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, anytime. Can I shake your hand? Thank you so much. Okay. What we have today?
All right. So today we're going to be talking about restorative justice and as it relates to mental health. Just to let everybody know, I'm a licensed clinical social worker for the nationally accredited. I have lots and lots. I'm not even going to tell you guys the number of years of experience I have because I don't want to tell my age.
So you educate?
Kind of. And lots of experience with medical social worker. I've done crisis. I've done home visiting. I've done platforms. I've engaged in restorative justice support throughout, not only throughout this community, but throughout the state. So with that being said, I wanted to really start the show with giving you guys something meaningful. So let's talk about restorative justice from the clinical perspective, me, Kimberly Warmsley, as a clinical social worker, and from the legal perspective with Mr. Jerome Clay and his experience within the criminal justice realm. So, Jerome, do you want to talk about some of your experience to the community, please?
So, as it relates to me, I went to law school out here in Stockton, and then I did 3 years in the public defenders. So I dealt with a lot of mental health individuals. I did a tour in the Court of Appeals as well.
Right on.
Just did a lot of work, about 10 years doing civil work. So in the mental health, you do see it in the criminal justice more and more frequently. And so I think they even created a court for the mental health courts, right? Because it's such a crisis. And so I think these are some good topics because we have to address the issues, right? We have to talk about the issues that mental health and crime go hand in hand.
Right.
You know, from my experience of just seeing it and representing a few clients, with my attorneys and at the public defenders, and you'll just see it constantly. Just
absolutely.
These issues. So So what is restorative justice and what we're talking about? Can you explain? What we're talking about on that?
So I'm going to give everybody the professional viewpoint and definition of restorative justice.
Okay.
So restorative justice is a system of criminal justice which focuses on the rehabilitation of offenders through reconciliation with victims and the community at large. Now, this is the new process that you will hear repetitively within the criminal justice system is restorative justice, which means going more from a punitive element of, someone getting like 15 years or 10 years or 7 years and, you're just incarcerated and or detained. Now we're talking about a process of healing, not only for the persons who have been penalized and sentenced to, the Department of Rehabilitative Services, but also really highlighting the trauma that they may have inflicted on the victims and how that process is dealt with or targeted. So let me just give you a little bit of background. I think this is very important data as we're talking about restorative justice. In the state of California, we spend approximately $56 billion per year to fund prison reform. $56 billion.
Okay.
So that equates up to $81,000 per individual that is detained.
So even with that statistic, right? So, and I've heard these statistics, and it makes me wonder, right? So why would they spend $81,000 a year on an inmate, and they'll spend $56 billion a year? And it gets people to wonder is, you know what? Prison is a money-making machine, right? To educate someone, right, to say, oh, you know what, they're in high school or elementary and we could put all this money here and we can get them educated, then they wouldn't commit crimes. So if you don't commit crimes, then there is no money. So as it relates to even when you're talking about the rehab of offenders, if there's no crimes, then how are you going to have the COs? How are you even employed if there really is no crime? So think about it. Even you're affected by it because you got to have crimes for you to be employed. You got to have crimes to have the COs get paid. You got to have crimes to have the mental health institution sell out their pills. Crime creates jobs.
Right.
Without crimes, you have less jobs. If everybody was in the world and they said, hey, you know what? I love you. No, I love you. I'm going to go to school to be a doctor. I'm going to go to school to be this. Then you would have nothing. You wouldn't have. It wouldn't be a balance in the world. So should they spend this much on prison? Maybe not. But what is the solution?
So that's a really, really, really good point. Because as stated, there's nearly 1.5 million people who have been and are detained in our criminal justice system. Right. So I understand what you mean when you say that there is a substantial amount of persons who are employed to operate the prison, who run the prison, who, we have the correctional officers, we have the nurses, the psychiatric technicians.
Right.
However, I think that we need to step back and start discussing, okay, so if we have this pool of money and we want to employ people, because I guess it is a profit in the sense that people are working. What I'm saying is that utilize that profit and hire individuals who actually can provide rehabilitation and a restorative process, like mental health providers, like wraparound services. When we talk about restoration back to the community, that should include taking an opportunity to teach these people who are detained how to get jobs, how to how to even go get a DMV ID,
but
like rehabilitative services that will help them.
But do they really want to? Because think about this. Okay, so we know here's some legal stuff. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, right? Involuntary servitude. However, there's always an exception, right? So the great founders, they write this law, but they put an exception, except you're incarcerated. So then you can have the involuntary servitude. So now you're looking at what you just said. If they have an individual that they picked up and they're housing him for $81,000 a year, best believe he's making that $81,000 a year because he's working for free. He's not getting paid with, the 5 cents a day he might make. Right. And then even then, he takes that money and he spends his little bitty money back into the prison for the high prison food. So now they're looking at this individual that makes them, let's say hypothetically speaking, makes them $100,000 a year, right? So they're making money on their investment. They put $81,000 a year. They're getting a $20,000 back return on their investment. Why should they then say, you know what? Why should we give him a license and all this? What they do is they do it, but they do it in a sneaky way. They have these services, but they don't tell them that these services exist, right? And so because they have the services there, but they don't tell them that the services exist, they can say, well, all he had to do was call this person. We gave him that car when he left, and they don't follow up because the whole motive to me is they want them to reoffend. Because if they reoffend, they can get that involuntary servitude again, And so, they got $56 billion a year for the prison system. They're not, if they're spending $56 billion, they're not losing $56 billion. They are making money because they'll rather pull up a prison than a college institution.
That's a very true statement. In fact, when I took a closer look at the whole system and its entirety, there was a little short blurb that indicated that as a state, we only spend $10,000 per student. Per student at a elementary school, high school, etc. Right. And so I think that as a society, we are investing more in prison system than that of people. And what is it for us as a community? Well, let's talk about that.
Okay.
So we're actually truly healing people, and we're actually truly providing services that will stabilize a person. Well, look how much productive that person may be. That person may go out and get a job, be able to provide taxes, be able to have a family, be able to mitigate the possible effects of generational trauma, where we're seeing a trend of a grandfather being incarcerated in prison and history of criminalization, then a father who's been in prison, incarcerated, and then we're seeing his son and so forth and so forth and so forth. Where do we as a society say that we have had enough? Where do we say that it's time to talk about a more healing element of recovery than punitive? And, if we're really looking deeply into the core issues, that's what I call it, the core issues of mental health, then we need to start understanding the effects of the trauma that starts. Why is that person offending? Why is that person engaging in criminalized behavior? Where's the why?
So I'll share this story, personal story, what happened to me. So we lived with my grandmother for a short time in Livermore. And so during that time, I went to Smith Elementary School. And it's a story that I've told to the NACP and to other various groups. What happened when I went to Smith, they tried to diagnose me with this learning disability, right? Put me in this RSB program. But this is how they did it, right? They brought me to this class, and they had, and I never forget it, like them things to today. They had like these Teddy Grahams. They had the Teddy Grahams in a yellow box. And they told me, if you come to this classroom, we'll give you these cookies. And I'm like, man, this is a great class. Like, really? I mean, and I'm in the, I think I'm in the 5th grade, right? And I'm like, oh, I can come to this class for cookies. And so I said, yeah, I want to go to the class. And so I voluntarily signed up to go into this RSP. They said I had a learning disability. And I know some people do have it, right? And I'm not knocking people with the with this, you know, with diseases or with any learning disabilities. So I go into this class, and the whole class, later I found out it's supposed to help you with your schoolwork to get you to where you're supposed to be. Right. But the whole time in class, they just feed me cookies. They let me do whatever I want to do. And so I was like, man, this is great. And I'm in the 5th grade. So it wasn't until we moved to Lathrop that I was in school, I think the 7th grade, 7th or 8th grade. I think it was the 8th grade or so. I get called out of class, and they said, you're in this RSP class. I said, yeah. I said, well, where the cookies at? I mean, what's going on? They said, cookies? What cookies are you talking about? You got a learning disability. I said, I got a what? They said, you got a learning disability. And I was like, okay, I mean, I never thought I had one, but what can I do to get out of here? Well, you got to test to get out. So then I test, and it's like, why are you in here? Your scores are not, you don't have no learning disability. The reason why I shared that story is because I think teachers, they sometimes put things in kids' minds, right? So if, like you saying, the generational, that's in that child's mind, to where my grandfather went to jail, my dad went to jail, therefore I have to go to jail, right? And so when they go to school, they don't get that support. What the teachers is like, well, you know what? Your whole family has been going to jail. You must have a learning disability. Go off to the side of the room. That's what they did to me. And it wasn't just by the grace of God. I realized what it was, and I'm like, no, I don't have this issue. And so I just think you're right. I think it starts in school. The teachers, they don't really care about the students, really. And if they have a student that's troubled, instead of dealing with those issues, they just push him along, right? So now you have a kid that's in high school, but he reads at a 3rd grade level. He doesn't even understand what's going on. And then if he does have learning disabilities, he just gets so far removed, and then he has no hope, he has no skills, no trade. What do you think he's going to do?
My case in point, right? And so I think that, and thank you for sharing that story to bring real light and understanding in a very genuine way of circumstances that not only have affected you, Jerome, but probably countless of people. Right. So one thing that I did research before this show, because this is a very important topic to me, is I wanted to understand more what you're saying is like the pipeline to prison, right? Yeah. And so that is where it truly starts, right? So, and I don't, this is no disrespect towards teachers. I admire teachers. Your job is, you have a very important job with teaching our most valuable assets, which is our children. Right. However, there are times and situations where teachers are overwhelmed, right? And so they're trying to teach the curriculum and teach these benchmarks, and they have this full scale of things that they have to do or they're obligated to do as a teacher. And so when you're seeing, we'll just say little Johnny, and little Johnny is having all of these behavioral issues. He's disruptive, he's, he's distracted, he's, a disruption to the classroom. And little Johnny is sent to the office, sent to the office, and sent to the office. And as time progresses, there's that gap, right? So little Johnny is behind right here in 3rd grade. But by the time he's in the 7th grade, he's here. And by the time he's in the 10th grade, he's here. And what I mean by that is there's a gap in his functionality academically. And so what happens? What happens with little Johnny is in 11th grade and he's reading at lack of motivation. He is completely disengaged. He has no hope. He has, he's feeling alienated from the system. Well, guess what? Society has incidentally been a direct influence of little Johnny saying, hey, well, if I can't make it in school, what am I going to do? Well, I don't know. Maybe going out, joining a gang or hanging out in the streets or cutting school. that sounds a little more, a little more attentive than going to school and sitting there in a 12th grade class with a 3rd grade reading level.
So I like that. So let's talk about little Johnny. So I ran for school board, and in running for school board, you get the school's financials.
Mm-hmm.
So your same scenario, little Johnny, he goes to school, and let's say little Johnny has a learning disability.
Right.
Right. The school submits his learning disability to the state. I don't know how all the funding works, but they get special funds.
Mm-hmm.
They get, even now with the LCAP, they get special funds for little Johnny with disability. So actually the school has the money. Now the question is, why don't they help little Johnny? Because you have IEP programs, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is the school does get the money. So don't let them say they don't get the money. If you pull their budget, you'll see they get a lot of millions of dollars for kids with disability. But yet these kids are not getting help, even though they have the money for services, right? And so to me, it seems like they want the money, but they don't want to give the help, because I have helped a few kids when they were trying to get kicked out of school, but they had IEP programs. And even then, you'll see that they have this money for them, and yet you've already identified this kid has issues. Mm-hmm. You've already identified that this individual is not reading at the proper grade level, right? So, but you have the money to bring him help. And yet, why don't you do it? They'll do it to a degree, like they'll bring a teacher in class sometimes, right? But then he feels behind because it's like he's singled out because you have a teacher, a special teacher for you in class, and they're reading here, right? They're reading Harry Potter, and you're still reading Huckleberry Finn. Yeah, so I'm just saying, and now he feels even more embarrassed because now the kids, especially now, kids are so cruel because, and I know you posted, you have kids killing themselves, little kids, because they're getting bullied, right? So this is always is going on now.
Right.
So now just think about it. You have a learning disability. The school gets millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is they bring a teacher in your classroom a lot of times to work with you in front of other students that then bully you. So now you really don't want to go. Right, so what happens? You say, I don't need it, and they say, fine, you don't need it. We still getting the millions, so you don't need it anyways. Then as they pass you along, you're now in high school, and you're trying to read whatever you're trying to read, and you don't understand. Like, you're reading, you're speaking, but you're not comprehending. Right, your comprehension is not there.
Right, and I think that there's so many layers of why little Johnny is struggling. Because lack of motivation, because of his academic ability or inability.
Right.
And we haven't even thrown other elements that little Johnny may be experiencing.
Home life.
The home life. What's going on at home? Where's dad? Where's mom? Is mom so inundated with working and multiple responsibilities that she's not as proactive in advocating for that child?
Right.
And I say all that to say this, that if we're really truly talking about rehabilitation, and we're really talking about breaking the cycle of recidivism in the criminal justice fields, then we really need to really dig deeper into the whys. We need to really dig deeper into the whys of a little Johnny and other students who have unfortunately hurt themselves or even taken their lives because we're not equipped. And when I'm looking at the dollar amounts that we're spending, $56 billion, and that's only 5% of the California budget, is the $56 billion. Why aren't we investing in more treatment, not only individually, but supports for the families? Like, I'm sorry, I know you Lakers fan, right?
Lakers fan. I know Lakers fan.
What fan are you? What do you like, Jerome? What team do you like?
As of currently of today, I'm a Oakland Warriors fan.
Oh, he's a Warriors fan.
but next year I might be a Kings fan. Who knows?
Well, hey, I'm gonna be honest. I'm a LeBron James fan. So
you're a Lakers fan now.
Yeah, I'm a
Lakers
Cleveland,
fan. Miami,
yeah, exactly. I've been everywhere. And I bring LeBron up for one purpose only.
With his father?
No.
Okay.
His school.
Oh, he left?
He actually formed, I think it's... the
high school.
Yeah.
And
I promise, or yes, I can.
Yeah.
I promise school. So in the school, so let's talk about the school.
In Akron, right?
Yeah.
And the parents can go to school for free too as well?
man, he must have had a social worker on his team. So in this school, he has a pantry. So if parents are struggling with food, the parents can come and get free food at the school. They have lots and lots of counseling, therapists. They give free uniforms, very intensive tutoring and interventions to help kids raise their academics. Wait, hold on. Governor Don got it. What is it called?
Promise School.
Is I Promise School?
It's the Promise.
Oh, it's the Promise School. Okay, so it's the Promise School. And very, family nights with the parents. It's